Jesus says, don't worry about your life. Right, Lord. It seems to me that these words from Jesus could not come at a better or a worse time for us, depending on your point of view. Lord knows we have enough things to worry about these days. The economy, the world political situation, and how that impacts our economy, national politics, things like insurance and health care. The list goes on and on and on. Sometimes folks feel their need to spread that sense of worry to others, just so they don't have to worry about worrying alone. We talked about bumper stickers. I saw one this past week whose owner was obviously not pleased with our current political situation. It simply read, "Worried yet?" It's easy to see how worry can become a leading national pastime. Now, into that hand-wringing environment, Jesus comes telling us not to worry. Doesn't that almost seem a little bit un-American? At the least, it seems to us to be just a tad bit irresponsible. I grew up with Mad Magazine. Now, that is part of my upbringing, and I don't know if that statement strikes a chord with any of you, but I do know that that magazine drove my parents up a wall. Mad was a humor magazine whose cover boy was a character named Alfred E. Newman. You might remember the quote that went along with that silly grin on his face that says, "What? Me worry?" My folks didn't appreciate this fine piece of literature because they felt it promoted everything that was counter to what good Americans should hold dear. It poked fun at institutions and authority and could be slightly irreverent at times, but basically, it just seemed stupid to them and a waste of the paper it was printed on. I guess that's why I loved it. But I think what me worry is the phrase that set them off most of all. Some folks see worry as a sign of living a mature, responsible life. If we don't worry, if things did not concern us, if we didn't give a thought to how to keep things from falling apart, before too long our world would come crashing down around us. But Jesus tells his followers, do not worry about your life. How does that fit into your view of the world? Does it make sense? Does it seem to be prudent? Is Jesus inviting you to lift up the "what me worry" banner? If that was true, I know my dad would be looking down in dismay at me today. So, what is this teaching from Jesus all about? First of all, we have to back up a verse before we look at the "don't worry" command. The context of these words is important. Jesus begins the previous verse, or begins this statement with the word "therefore." Now, when you see that word, you have to say to yourself, whoa, back up. What follows is directly connected to what has just come before. So, listen again to the verse that comes just before the "don't worry" command. Jesus says, no one can serve two masters. For a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. That is at the heart of what Jesus is teaching in the following verses. You cannot serve God and wealth. Every day, we struggle to live lives that are consistent with what we believe. And that struggle gets more intense the closer it comes to our wallets and to our possessions, because that's when decisions and choices become really difficult. You all know what it's like to fight that battle. We live in a culture that sees value in terms of the things that we own and the size of our bank account. And it tells us that no matter how much we have, it's never enough. You're always going to want more. And the more we accumulate, the more we live in fear of having it taken away. That's what happens when we dedicate ourselves to the task of having stuff. We start to worry about whether we'll have enough. And then we convince ourselves that we don't have enough. You see, built into serving wealth is the fear that that wealth will run out. Think about it in the way that we understand economics. There is value in scarcity. If there was an unlimited supply of oil in the world, gas prices would be pushing $4 a gallon right now. If diamonds were as plentiful as river rocks, they wouldn't be valued as precious gems. There is value in scarcity. And if we have a lot of scarce stuff, then we are wealthy and we're going to use up a lot of energy to stay that way, to hang on to what we've got. That's what serving wealth is all about. And worry is a natural byproduct of our serving wealth. Now, with that thought in mind, let's turn our attention to what we know about God, to what we believe about God. Is there anything about God that you can equate with scarcity or shortage? From the very beginning, God is seen as the creator of a world where we would lack for nothing. The garden where Adam and Eve were placed was a vision of abundance. Everything that they needed was there. There is no talk of scarcity. Isaiah spoke of God's promise to the people returning from exile, and his words overflow with the abundant love of God. Come out to all those who are in darkness. Show yourselves. They shall feed along the ways, and on all the bare heights shall be their pasture. They shall not hunger or thirst, neither scorching wind nor sun shall strike them down. For he who has pity on them will lead them, and by springs of water will guide them. No scarcity, only abundance. Did Jesus say, I have come that you might have life, but have a shortage of it? No. I have come that you might have life and have it in abundance. The first miracle that Jesus performed in John's account of his life was to turn scarcity into abundance. They were running out of wine at a wedding feast. So Jesus changed these big 30-gallon clay pots of water into wine, and a limited commodity became limitless. Jesus talked with a thirsty woman who came to the well to draw water. And he told her that her thirst would always return after drinking well water, but if she followed him, all of her deepest needs would be met in abundance. Again, scarcity turned into abundance. And what were Jesus' final words to his followers after he was raised from the dead and left the earth behind? Did he say, I'm going to make myself scarce? Good luck in trying to make it through life without me? No. He said, Lo, I am with you always. And it's no accident that the writer of Revelation was trying to describe what heaven would be like using phrases like, the streets will be paved with gold. Gold would be as common as paving stones. God is not about scarcity, but about abundance in love and caring for us. And so there's a choice that we have to make, even before we decide whether or not we're going to be worriers. And that choice is whether we will serve God or wealth. Will we be a slave of the fear of scarcity and losing what we have worked to acquire? Or will we live life in awe of God, whose love for us knows no limits? Jesus is challenging us to look inside ourselves and see where our loyalties lie. When we worry, our focus is divided. The word that the Greeks used for worry meant splitting your attention or dividing your concern. And it's really important for us to keep that in mind as we work through this passage and apply it to our lives. Jesus is not saying that our concerns are groundless, that our worries are without point. He isn't saying that when we follow him, our problems are going to disappear and we will be wealthy beyond our wildest dreams. What he is saying is that God knows our needs. God knows that life can be hard. God knows that we struggle. And the choice we have to make is whether we're going to serve God and wealth or simply serve God. Will we let our attention be diverted? Or Or will we look to God first in everything, knowing that all other challenges in life will then fall into their proper order, and that God will give us the calmness and the wisdom to deal with those situations? Jesus questions the faith of his followers in this story. He calls them, "You of little faith." Do you remember another story when he used that same language? When Peter was walking toward Jesus on the water and a storm blew up. Things were going fine for Peter as long as he kept his focus on Jesus. He began to sink when his attention was diverted away from Jesus, and he started worrying about the storm around him. He began to worry about the wind and how implausible it was that he was walking on water, and his lack of focus is what sunk him. Even when life seems like it's overwhelming, God will be there. God will not forget us. Did you pick up that promise that came through to us in Isaiah's reading? We think sometimes that God is no longer there for us. Barb read, Zion said, "The Lord has forsaken me. My Lord has forgotten me." And what's the word that came back from God? Can a woman forget her nursing child or show no compassion for the child of her womb? Even these may forget, yet I will not forget you. Come on now, God says. I can no more forget about you than a mother can lose track of her nursing child. But in case we needed any more proof that God is serious and committed to never forgetting, as we said with the kids, God gets a tattoo. I have inscribed you on the palms of my hands. If there were any possibility that God might lose track of us, not to worry. You are written, you are inscribed, your name is tattooed on God's hand. You belong to God. My dad had a phrase he liked to use, and he used it often. It was, "Don't sweat the small stuff." He used that anytime it looked like there were too many things to worry about in the course of a day. The wisdom behind that advice is that it took seriously the fact that life is challenging. But it also understands that most of what we worry about is small stuff. When Jesus tells us not to worry about tomorrow, he's telling us don't sweat the small stuff. There are things that we can worry about every day, but one thing that we don't have to worry about is God's place in all of this. Because we belong to God. And because we take that claim seriously, all the rest is small stuff. The one thing that really matters is that you are linked with God with a love that cannot be broken. What? Me worry? I don't think so. I belong to God. And so do you. Amen. Would you pray with me? Thank you, God, for a reminder of your presence and your power. Thank you for letting us know again that you understand our lives, our deepest needs, and our deepest concerns, but you are there with us through all of that. And that is the foundation upon which we stand. The solid rock of our faith. The foundation of all that we do. We need not fear, for you are with us. Thank you in Jesus' name.